Hey everybody! Welcome to Friday the 13th, the series. I'm your producer, Robert.
And I'm your guest, Peter.
And after a complete, spoiler-filled recap of the episode, we are going to discuss the show you either just learned existed or always wondered how it existed. We promise the answers will be few and far between because we're just here to have some goofity fun exploring a show that, despite or possibly even because of its faults, isn't good and isn't so bad it's good, but is still somehow oddly charming. Let's dive in, shall we? Yep, we're doing things a little differently now. So before we get to Friday, I want to take a moment up top to bring y'all up to speed. As I announced last episode, Hill Street is pursuing her dream of working in theater, so she might swing by to guest host an episode sometime down the line, but won't be a regular contributor. Instead, my old friend Peter will be joining us today. It's his first time podcasting, so please make him feel at home. We had so much fun discussing the show, we went a little overboard. Therefore, this episode will begin momentarily with me reading the first part of the story synopsis, then we'll meet Peter, discuss the first section of the story, and finish with our proprietary segment, Curio of the Week. And if you don't hate fun, the complete run of Friday the 13th the series can currently be watched for free on YouTube, courtesy of at least 2 different channels. Episode 11, Scarecrow. I recently watched a review of Longlegs, in which the host talked about Jonathan Demme and David Fincher, in the 90s, perfecting modern movie darkness. Well, that process began here, as this opening shot at a kitchen table in a rustic farmhouse might have actually been lit by nothing but the single bare bulb we see hanging from the ceiling. That isn't a slight. It actually looks great, and is much better composed than a similar shot from the very first episode of this series. A father and his 12-year-old son are apparently auditing the farm's financial status together, and Dad is shockingly ebullient given their dire straits, but it all snaps into focus when he assures his son it's all going to be okay because the boy's dead mother is watching over them from heaven. Well done, show. There's still a huge tonal clash with the high contrast lighting, the storm raging outside, and our near certainty at least one of these two is about to be rent asunder by a living scarecrow, but at least that single line completely explains the character's outlook on life. Outside, an actress preparing for her role in an I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot watches their house, turns, walks toward us with an expression that asks, evil counts as an emotion, right? Then turns around to watch the house again. I guess they didn't have time to spin the camera to grab the close-up of her face, but that begs the question, why show her face at all at this point? Seems like it's far more mysterious if you don't do that. We cut to a photo of Father Farmer pinned to our eponymous scarecrow, and since the episode isn't being coy, neither shall we. This scarecrow is a surrealist masterpiece. If the episode didn't tell me what it was, I never would have guessed, but it's pure nightmare fuel. I'll give the episode that. The face is later referred to as being leather, but looks like a cross between a bronze sculpture by Rodin and the Doom Patrol's Robot Man. For some reason, it looks like it's wearing a helmet made from the same material as its face, and the jaunty red scarf about its neck is a lovely counterpoint. Its mouth stretches almost all the way around its head, and its jaws move like a rejected walleye tossed on a riverbank under a hot August sun. If you told me this thing was composed entirely of materials pilfered from the dumpsters outside the puppet shop working on Labyrinth, I wouldn't bat an eye. Oh, and Marge Longacre, the lady we just saw, who I'm branding with the moniker Summer, is here too, watching it silently beg for death. How jarring. Now I really don't understand the blocking of the previous shot of her. Back in the farmhouse, Dad continues to be almost intolerably upbeat, right up until the moment he opens the front door because he apparently hears something the rest of us can't, laughs at the waking nightmare that is the scarecrow, right up until the moment it swings a scythe at him, then slams the door. Unfortunately, with no explanation whatsoever, the scarecrow is now inside his home, right behind him. As Father Farmer backs away, he trips over something we can't see, yells like he's auditioning for Troll 2, then is rendered decapitato as his young son bears witness. If this didn't all happen so quickly and with such emotional dissonance, I would probably feel for the characters instead of just thinking, that scarecrow really needs the scythe equivalent of a wakizashi for just this sort of tight quarters situation. I realize it's getting old hearing me say I can't believe what this show got away with, but I didn't think you could show severed heads on TV back then, until this very moment. And its severedness is underlined when Summer Longacre enters, picks it up, and strolls off with it. What about the kid? Let's put a pin in that. In another unexpected cut, we see a sunrise, then witness Summer Longacre savoring said sunrise. It's actually the only believable moment of her performance. And a third cut brings us to the single best shot of the entire series thus far. Hell, one of the best shots in horror. Hell, one of the best shots in all of film and television. We see her from behind, arms outstretched, gazing over rolling hills of dying wheat, past the empty Scarecrow cross in the middle distance, all the way to the sun rising on the horizon, reducing all but the azure sky to silhouette, while still failing to eliminate the dark underbelly of every cumulonimbus cloud in the sky. I want to believe Terrence Malick saw this, then set fire to the original film stock of Badlands. It conjures images of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not only because of the aesthetic similarities to the final moments of that film, but because the editing choices and pacing thus far feel like they're mirroring Tobe Hooper's decision to intentionally edit wrong in order to create a sense of unease in the viewer. Unfortunately, it's all downhill from here. Mickey and Ryan are on a little road trip in the Winchester Mobile, which, given the context, feels more like the Winchester Mobile than ever. This show never looks the same way twice, and this is a case in point. It's almost alarming seeing our heroes out of the city, like we're watching an entirely different show, contributing to the dreamlike nature of this episode. Jack has sent them a postcard explaining he'll still be looking for the Icarus feather for another week or two. Isn't that an item from the Nintendo game Kid Icarus? Justifying his absence from this episode. By my count, that's 2 in a row. Also of note, Mickey is now a blonde, I think? Maybe there's still a hint of red, but it's not the rich amber of previous episodes. It's a small thing, but adds a little something to this episode feeling not right, like it's all one of the characters' dreams. In a scene that exists only to set up a later reveal about Ryan's backstory, they stop to ask directions. Mickey holds a picnic basket in one hand, and while you're trying to figure out why, Ryan steps out of a furniture store and we realize he's wearing a baseball cap with ear flaps, turtleneck, and a button-down sweater that can compete with any Christmas bad sweater you've ever seen. It doesn't help, both front pockets are bulging with what are probably winter gloves. Hey guy, I don't get it either, but some pockets are just meant to be decorative. While you're trying to get your head around that, you assume she tosses him an egg or something from the basket, but it turns out to be an old baseball she was tossing the whole time. But you failed to notice because there are so many other visual distractions. When he realizes it bears the inscription, "To Ryan from Jimmy," he becomes agitated but claims it's nothing. Our heroes arrive at the farm of Canadian Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen, if Uncle Owen had been played by Chris Cooper, and are informed by the owners of the Scarecrow it burned up years ago in a crop fire. Mickey asks to use the bathroom, secretly investigates the home, and inadvertently unleashes an agitated man-child that immediately attacks her. Uncle Chris Cooper and Aunt Beru quickly sequester him back in his closet, so happy ending? This episode really keeps you on your toes. Not for nothing, but this little confrontation is incredibly well staged, with both well-motivated camera movement and Citizen Kane-level staging in depth. Outside, they call BS on the Scarecrow burning up, as they found out the hard way. The antiques can't be destroyed. Boy, that sure sounds like an interesting story. Would have been nice to have seen that. Despite just being kicked out of the house and attacked because they opened a door they shouldn't have, Mickey and Ryan decide to trespass all over the property. Hey, maybe phone the police about the adult male being held against his will? Despite it being cold, Mickey is wisely wearing her finest investigation skirt. I don't know, maybe nylons are warmer than they look? As expected, while examining a crossbeam for a Scarecrow, they're already busted by Summer, our exulting head collector, no less. Instead of creating a little scare by hearing her call out, then having Mickey and Ryan turn to discover her, she just ambles into the shot before heralding her presence. When she asks them what they're doing, Ryan tries the old, "we might ask the same of you" gambit. Nice try, buddy. Maybe leave this one to the adults. You'll have to slow the footage down, but it's worth it to see the side-eye Mickey gives him. Hey, Mickey introduces them both, using their real names for some reason, and she pronounces Ryan's last name as Dallion. So, is she saying it wrong, or is that how it's really pronounced? So I can go back to making fun of Ryan for trying to give himself the nickname of the Lion. I'm completely confused now, so I'm just going to take this as carte blanche to revert to form. I take a lot of shots at Ryan, so I will say that upon learning Summer Longacre runs the only boarding house in town, John D. LeMay's look of repressed discomfort as he laughs with her and drolly delivers the line, "Nothing like a monopoly," is perfection, and my favorite delivery of his for the entire series thus far. I wish it wasn't ruined by some massive pumpkins in the background that steal focus from our noble players. Later, Aunt Beru quietly exits their son's closet, one assumes. So maybe she just put him to bed? I'm doing the lion's share of the storytelling here because I have to, and make no promises about what's actually happening. We never do see what exactly is behind that door. Maybe it's a whole barbarian situation, for all I know. The important part is Aunt Beru heads out into the night. It seems their farm cultivates fog, and it is harvest season. Summer previously overheard Mickey and Ryan speculate Aunt Beru might reach out to them, so Auntie B is next on the chopping block. Summer has carried that Scarecrow, and I have to assume, its scythe all the way to their farm and pins a Polaroid photograph to it. Unbelievably, I mean that literally, Aunt Beru makes it all the way to Summer's lodge in a sequence that feels very John Carpenter, then, on the threshold, discovers the Scarecrow is immediately behind her, and it takes her out with its scythe. Even by slasher standards, this thing has full-on teleportation powers. Mickey hears it and comes to investigate. She's once again clad almost entirely in black, which is a really poor choice this show keeps making, given how often she's lost to overly dark shots. Mickey arrives just in time to see a severed head, mouth agape, eyes wide, rocking back and forth at the threshold. Scarecrow himself is just chillin', and we get a 70s era zoom in on him that should serve as a lesson we really need to bring these back for horror films. I am really gonna miss your calls for commercial break, Hill Street. So, Peter, you want to tell the good folks how we know each other?
From high school.
The fun part about doing this is actually coming up with questions that I've never thought to ask in any other context, but can you actually remember even which grade or class or anything about how we originally met? I honestly don't, so if you can, you win.
I was hoping to ask you that question. Because I don't. My memory is way too shitty to remember that kind of stuff. I remember fragments. I know we had multiple classes together.
Yeah, I remember things like hanging out at lunch.
The only fragment I remember is us not even sneaking out of class because we were seniors by then, but writing ourselves out of class and going to check out Suicide Kings.
Your memory differs from mine because although I distinctly remember seeing Suicide Kings in theaters, I do not remember ever writing myself out of school. Leaving at lunchtime, getting some lunch and coming back, yeah, I did that all the time. But I don't recall writing myself out. I don't even remember that being a thing we could do.
I kept tying it to an AP class, but I also kind of relate it to the end of the year. I'd have to look up when Suicide Kings came out to confirm.
What, are you trying to tell me you don't keep the release date of Suicide Kings on the tip of your tongue at all times?
No, the only memory I have, so I guess I probably could have pieced that together and prepared that for this question.
Work with what you got.
But like I said, I was hoping you were going to bring some of that information because...
Have you never listened to this podcast, Peter? I bring nothing. You know what's crazy is I was actually thinking probably within the last week, I think I would like to rewatch Suicide Kings again one of these days.
I have it, I see it, and I still haven't wanted to watch it.
You have a physical copy of Suicide Kings?
Oh, yeah. I still have a number of my DVDs, not even Blu-rays, a number of my DVDs sitting on a spindle.
That's right, folks. Peter's really here to put me in touch with that youth audience I'm sorely lacking. Tell us more about your DVD collection, old man.
You see, back before you could just download this stuff on Pirate Bay or whatever you youngins use now.
Do you actually have something that plays DVDs?
Yeah, my Xbox. Here's my real problem, and I get laughed at quite regularly for it. I never had money to buy a decent widescreen TV, so all my DVDs are full-screen cuts. And everybody looks at me going, you're an idiot. Why the hell did you buy full-screen cuts of DVDs? You lost half the image. I have multiple spindles of full-screen cuts of DVDs. The only reason I'd have any widescreen is as if it just happened to come with a widescreen cut as well.
Oh, you poor man. Oh, like the airplane printed upside down on that stamp. Those might actually be worth something.
Hey, if you ever wanted to feel like you were watching a movie on the old Channel 13 standard TV, you can come and borrow one of my full screen DVDs.
Well, you joke, but one of my favorite things is digging out old VHS tapes because somehow we still have this little TV VCR combo thing that plays them and popping one in, not to watch whatever we recorded, but to watch the old commercials.
I think the youngins use YouTube for that now.
This is true. This would be far more expedient.
You actually have the potential for more money there. You should upload those things up to YouTube and get some advertising dollars.
Be more profitable than a Friday the 13th the series podcast, I'll tell you that right now. I get to ask another question I don't honestly know the answer to. I'm looking forward to this. When exactly and how did you discover horror?
That one's a tough one. You would have to define horror. I wasn't one of those kids that was allowed to watch rated R movies since I was like 5 or anything like that.
Yeah,
that
pretty
was
much
never...
the same for me.
My early horror would be like your Return to Oz or shit, even like Secret of Nim.
Oh, I will totally count those.
Those would be my original like early horror, like your Gremlins or Arachnophobia. Return to Oz, holy crap, like I had nightmares about like women who were taking their freaking heads off and screaming at me.
Oh yeah, that's some nightmare fuel. To quote Bill Hicks, I don't know who that's for.
And Stephen King was really my entry into horror books and therefore into horror movies that I found were usually quite disappointing.
Yeah, honestly, I think King was probably my gateway drug too. Started with the book Nightmares and Dreamscapes myself.
I actually picked that one up really early, and with as long as it looked, I left it alone. I'm like, no, I'm not touching that one. Let me go.
Well, it's King. That could be said of any book you wrote at that time.
I would say that like your Salem's Lot or your Cujo were much shorter reads.
Maybe shorter overall, but I think what convinced me to finally read Nightmares and Dreamscapes was the fact they were short stories.
Yeah.
Because I was the same way. I picked it up and owned it for years and never touched it. And then one day in high school just started going through them and kind of got hooked.
I still don't think I've ever finished it. Like, is that one the one that starts out with Dylan's body or something like that? It's the one where the guy like drives into a hole in the road.
Yeah, it's a revenge tale where a guy's getting revenge on a mob boss.
Yeah.
And his plan is to ambush him on his drive to Vegas by exactly that, digging a hole and trapping the entire car.
Looney Tunesing him into a hole and burying him.
Yeah, I could see the Wile E. Coyote angle to it. And what are some of your favorite horror books, movies, games, music?
King was definitely my gateway, and that led me to, obviously, or maybe not, Clive Barker, which felt like a step up.
Yep, he was one of the first for me as well.
Stephen King, his writing felt very childlike, almost. If we're ever going to talk about needful things, definitely a lot of poop and sex, lowbrow kind of childish writing. Like Barker took those concepts and like made them artsy. Mm-hmm. I feel like it definitely went into much more artistic detail in describing how somebody was cut apart or torn apart or anything like that.
Yeah, King is Ralph Bakshi to Clive Barker's R. Crumb.
Yeah, but I was definitely into the Books of Blood. That was one of the first Barker books I read that I adored. I loved that series and would reread it over and over. I love, if we're going to go into movies, like In the Mouth of Madness or Barker's like Lord of Illusions.
You've seen the director's cut of that?
Oh yeah, I own that one. I love everything about Lord of Illusions. That's one of those movies that I'll watch every like 3 months.
Ooh, I've seen both cuts, but I'll have to come over sometime and watch the widescreen version.
No, you only get standard. If we're going to talk about like 80s horror movies, I was into Nightmare on Elm Street significantly more than Friday the 13th or Halloween. Like I wasn't into Jason or Mike Myers, but definitely loved the Freddy Krueger movies. I was never into Chucky when it first came out, but I've definitely started to enjoy the Chucky TV series. So I've actually like started to work my way through the series more recently.
You're referring to the TV series that just came out a couple of years back and is possibly still going?
Yeah, they've basically continued the lore and actually done a pretty decent job through the first season. I think I'm probably about a season and a half in that I felt they did a good job with coming up with something a little bit more creative for Chucky to do in the modern era.
Yeah, I've heard it's really good and a lot of fun.
I think it gets even more extreme. I've heard rumors about where season 2 goes or season 3 goes to like ridiculous levels, which to me, for a runaround killer doll, that seems fine. Like,
Yeah, it has carte blanche to take liberties.
I'm definitely not into any kind of like torture porn stuff. I've never been into like your Last House on the Left or Hills Have Eyes. Even Saw is borderline, though I would say Saw is extremely smart in how it does it, which is why I enjoy it a lot.
How many of the Saw movies have you seen, ballpark?
I think I've seen the first 3.
Okay.
I actually just sat down with my oldest and watched Paranormal Activity for the first time with her.
Meaning your first time?
Her first time. I'm introducing her to horror because she definitely likes, like, she watched through all the Scream series because the Scream series was the easiest one to kind of introduce, which is weird because with Scream, you kind of want to know the horror genre first to get all the inside jokes.
Yeah, it's based on a knowledge of the genre.
Right, but it also doesn't have all the weird graphic sex or murder. It is really just straight serial killer running around stabbing people.
A little bit easier to watch with Dad. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I always got the sense that the Child's Play films don't really have any sex or nudity in them.
Not that I recall. It's all about like chasing the little boy. So
Well, let's hope not then. So have you shown those to your daughter?
no. She is looking for like stuff with a twist, almost like some of that smarter horror. So I'm thinking about like Frailty, maybe.
Yeah, I've never actually seen it, but it's on my list.
I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was really smart.
Would you say that that is an early version of what's now called elevated horror? Your Midsummers, your The Witch, your Hereditaries, possibly your The Lighthouses?
Yeah, providing a bit more story than slasher coming and chasing you down. And I really appreciate those. I enjoy Talk to Me, Late Night with the Devil.
Oh, you call it Late Night with the Devil?
Oh, yeah. I enjoyed that one. The ending was a little bit meh, but the build-up was definitely enjoyable to watch. And I kind of liked the format.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I also really enjoy the comedy horrors as well. I know that you're not necessarily into, but I love the Cabin in the Woods, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, Zombieland type. To me, they're almost like smart horror in the fact that you're taking something that's supposed to be scary and kind of dark and adding enough humor to it that you can kind of laugh through it.
Yeah, as long as they're actually comedies, then I'm on board. Of those films you just listed, I've seen Cabin in the Woods and Zombieland, and I actually really like both of those. But in general, I think if someone were to say to me, do you like horror comedies? I would probably say no. A lot of times the first film people cite is American Werewolf in London. And I've only seen it once, but honestly, I just wasn't that big a fan. It kind of left me with a neither fish nor fowl feeling where it didn't seem terribly scary and did not seem funny for something people refer to as a horror comedy.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Tucker and Dale versus Evil, but I've heard good things and would be curious to give it a try one of these days.
I like it because it's definitely playing on that Scream horror trope. You're basically flipping it almost like Wicked, like the Wicked Witch and Return to Oz, or Cobra Kai, where you're following Johnny instead of LaRusso. These guys are coming off like they are the podunk horror slasher to the point where the kids are thinking they're the podunk horror slashers and then dying accidentally. And they're trying to figure out what the hell is going on because these kids keep dying around them.
Well, I'm guessing it's far more crowd-pleasing than in a violent nature, which also flips the standard convention on its head. I'm getting the sense I'm in the minority and that I enjoyed it, but I think a lot of people don't, and I completely understand why. But I guess what always kind of catches me off guard is when people say some combination of there's not enough happening, it's so simple, the characters aren't terribly likable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's like most of the Friday the 13th films. That's basically what you're getting, but you're with the unlikable protagonists instead of the very interesting antagonist, which really is the reason you're here.
Yeah.
Even when it's Jason compared to Freddy, I'm still thinking we'd rather see Jason do his thing than just hang out with all of these losers. So, yeah, why not just follow him through the story?
That's fair.
Did you catch it already?
No, I haven't checked that one out.
Take one of your late-stage Friday the 13th films, at which point Jason is basically a zombie. And now imagine going through the entire film, but from Jason's point of view.
Okay.
And it's not trying to reinvent it. I'm not saying he's the protagonist and he's like saving anyone, or the kids are so awful that he's somehow morally superior. It's nothing like that. He's just killing innocent kids in the woods, but it's sticking mostly with him through the entire movie and seeing things from his point of view.
Interesting.
It definitely has some faults, specifically to anyone that criticizes the long, rather drawn-out conclusion. I've heard the director speak on it, and I don't think it was a bad choice to end in that way, but I just think less is more, and he drug it out way too long.
And see, to me, that type of stuff is creative, and it would be the type of thing that I'd get into and at least check out, give it a try. Anything that's not just straight slasher and jump scares, I'm way into trying out.
As long as it doesn't end up being bodies, bodies, bodies.
Oh man, don't even get me started on bodies, bodies, bodies. For a movie that did so well to make fun of something that I despise it because of because of what they were saying.
That's okay. In terms of demographic overlap between bodies, 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 and fans of Friday the 13th, the series, fortunately, there is zero.
If you like the horror genre as much as we do, you can preview the horror comic book Requiem for a Psychopath right now, for free, at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. Imagine a world in which horror film slashers are real. Then imagine a troubled teen bringing one out of retirement to help him take revenge on his bullies. It was written by me and drawn by friend of the show, Stephen Yu. Again, that's Requiem for a Psychopath on the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And, if you dig it, please either review and rate it 5 stars on Amazon, or don't rate and review it at all. Ratings of less than 5 stars send the algorithm into murder mode for some reason. Thanks. I hope you enjoy it.
What was your knowledge of Friday the 13th, the series, before the podcast?
I had heard of it. I saw the advertisements for it, potentially. But I knew nothing about it. It definitely wouldn't have been a show I would have even been allowed to watch.
You never just wandered into a room when it was on.
Here's the thing. There's no Jason to it. Like, I never would have went, oh, this is Jason. This is Friday the 13th, the series.
Or you bite your tongue. He's going to show up eventually. That is the hill I will die on. He is my great pumpkin.
I will keep holding my breath.
Unless things have changed since last we spoke. You have seen only the 2 first episodes, but you have listened to every episode of the podcast.
Yep.
But you have done no outside research. You haven't gone on IMDb. You haven't read any blogs.
I have only done enough to capture the names and the relationships between Mickey, Ryan, Marshak, and the uncle. I couldn't remember if it was an uncle or a grandfather.
Yeah, totally understandable. I have to remind myself sometimes. But yeah, fortunately, I now have uncle as just the first part of his name.
Yep.
As if his birth certificate was Uncle Louis Vonderdy. Who would do that to their child? I don't know, but Canadians, I guess.
I also had to confirm the name of the store, since this one didn't actually
The
have
store wasn't
the
present.
store in it because they were already on the road trip.
Yeah, again, just kind of wildly different. Just when you think you understand the show and have the pattern down, they kind of break it. Kind of keeps you on your toes. What would you compare Friday the 13th, the series, to?
You've challenged me. I don't.
I'm pretty sure you do not watch Supernatural, right? You've never seen that?
I watch movies and read books and that sort of thing, but there's not a whole lot of TV shows that I've expanded into.
Well, I think it's more telling what you're not saying. You're not comparing Friday the 13th, the series, to, I don't know, the Friday the 13th movies.
Yeah, there is absolutely zero relation there.
Yes.
The closest I could come...
Titular only.
The closest I could come is like any kind of like Monster of the Week series, like your X-Files.
Yeah, I could see that. So you've never watched like Tales from the Dark Side, maybe?
Nope.
Or... Actually, interesting question for myself. I don't think we've ever really discussed this. Were you a Twilight Zone guy growing up?
I did enjoy Twilight Zone, the movie. I have seen bits and pieces of the TV shows, but I couldn't tell you which ones I've seen. As a kid, that would probably be one of my early quote-unquote horror, would be Twilight Zone. I don't know if you even consider that horror or if it's too weak by today's standards.
Yeah, it always rides that line, and it depends on the episode, because they would do episodes that were just full-on comedy. They weren't always meant to give you an unshakable sense of existential dread.
It was more weird, almost sci-fi-ish, closer to like Black Mirror.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, very conceptual, intellectual horror.
I don't even know what the premise of Supernatural is.
It's all things horror. It ran for 14 seasons, man. They covered it all.
Got it. Yeah, I'll have to peek at it.
Just out of curiosity, and I think I know the answer to this, are you familiar with any other Canadian TV shows, especially from around the time of Friday the 13th, the series?
Not at all.
You know what I'm really asking? Have you seen The Littlest Hobo?
I have heard you guys talk about The Littlest Hobo. I am not aware.
It's something. It's as much fun as watching Friday the 13th, the series.
I don't think it's on my...
Oh, it'll cure what ails you. Its plot lines are buck wild. It'll be my next podcast. No, I legitimately enjoy it and recommend it for people who find Friday the 13th, the series, enjoyable in the same way I do. But I draw the line at Maniac Mansion.
Oh.
We all thought we were going in for ironic good times, and I think we were all left just staring blankly at a staticky screen, wondering where the last 4 hours had gone. We definitely lost time. We all assumed we'd just been abducted by aliens and hoped that was the case, because otherwise I have to live in a world where I actually watched that first episode. And oh man, I don't know what I saw.
I think I was actually interested in checking that out. I think I recall that coming. And I'm like, oh, I liked Maniac Mansion as a kid. I never got anywhere. I was never smart enough to figure it all out, I guess.
Oh, fantastic game, yeah. Speaking of me bagging on things, am I too hard on Friday the 13th, the series?
Oh, no, definitely not. If anything, I feel like you're pretty light on it. I didn't enjoy the Monks and the Pen one. I thought that one was dull and boring. Whereas, like, the Scarecrow one, I definitely appreciate that you gave me this one. I enjoyed this one.
Yeah, we chose well. We lucked out, man.
It feels very 80s in some of its action.
You mean in the way the show is structured and the dialogue?
Yeah, the way the dialogue works, the way some of the fights look, the twist at the end. It's very, very generic 80s structure show.
Well, let's wrap this up now and then never speak of it again.
which I do have to say, the question of where the heads are, the end.
We're starting at the end and working our way backwards through the episode. We're going to memento this podcast.
I was going to say, you could cut from here, just tack that on to the tail end of the podcast.
Since we're there anyway, you want to bust out your notes and lead us through this mess, Peter?
The opener is father and son in what looks like a little farmer house kitchen.
Yes, we meet the Minos, I think is how they pronounce it.
Yeah.
Dave and Jordy Mino, the most happy-go-lucky, podunk, starving farmers you've ever met.
Who are just barely making their bills. They even have their bills strategically spread across the dining room table.
Were you almost creeped out by how upbeat the dad was?
Remember, we have Mom up in heaven looking out for us. Just comes out of nowhere.
It's such a strange opening to a horror film. This man is going to lose his head within about 1 minute of screen time.
And it felt like they were trying to make it sad for us as quick as possible.
Well, that is exactly the quagmire that is this show and why it's perfect for a podcast format. There's so much to debate because I totally hear your suggestion that maybe it was intentional, but at the same time, I think this actor showed up on set, was only looking at the script for the very first time, made a strong decision, and just no one said, oh, no, this is like a scary thing. We've got thunder and lightning going on outside. You're on this decrepit old farm. It's very creepy. Play it in a way that is foreboding and like you're downtrodden. And the actor just did the opposite of that. And they just said, okay, we got it in one. Moving on.
I was going to say, no second take.
It's like every episode of this show was directed by Ed Wood. That was perfect. Moving on.
Also, when he finally opens that door and sees said Scarecrow, I'm like, what the fuck is that? It doesn't look like any Scarecrow I've ever seen.
You know, I give these shows a lot of leeway because it's horror, but I call BS on the teleportation abilities of this Scarecrow.
He does that multiple times through this episode where he is upstairs and now he's downstairs. Or he was in front of you, now he's behind you.
And I don't get it because This seems like one of the few costumes that they have where the actor probably had a good degree of movement and could see what they were doing, and for some reason they still don't have him chasing anyone.
I started to question whether it wasn't even an actor. It almost looked like Marge pushes that thing through the doorway.
It's a ventriloquist puppet, not a scarecrow. I just realized I created a crystal ball question. Will this show eventually do the ventriloquist thing? And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there as a freebie. I'm going to say definitely.
What the hell is that face supposed to be? Is that like a leather-wrapped dummy?
And does it have gills? Because it almost, it's breathing through its mouth, but almost as if it had gills. If a mouth could be gills, that's how this thing breathes one time and only one time, and then we never see that again.
It was a dummy. They needed to make some kind of movement there to make it look alive.
Or the actor was just suffocating under that leather mask.
It took me a third watching to figure out that Geordi only sees a figure in a raincoat pick up the head and leave through the front door.
It's only occurring to me now that it's maybe even more disturbing that the Scarecrow itself wasn't taking the heads. I guess Marge was?
Right. From what we saw at the end, he just slumps down as soon as he's made his kill.
But what is Marge Longacre doing with the heads, Peter?
Maybe this is Return to Oz.
No, we got enough other horror references going in here with the whole I Know What You Did Last Summer nature of that getup. This whole episode, I kept thinking this is a twofer. We've got a haunted Scarecrow and the killer from I Know What You Did Last Summer.
With no rain. Except for the storm at the beginning.
That was the only one where no one was outside, essentially, so we don't have to worry about filming people getting wet, which really slows down production.
We know it's not rainy or stormy or anything like that because right afterward you have the shot of Marge with her weirdest Jesus pose ever, which I'm assuming it's her pretending to be a scarecrow.
I'm not saying the shot makes sense. I'm just saying it's the best shot that's been in this series so far.
But what's it supposed to mean?
Hey man, it's like the dance of death at the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It doesn't have literal meaning. It's about the way it makes you feel.
I'm glad you brought up the Dance of Death, because I definitely want to talk about another shot that looks very much like the Dance of Death from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Please.
The shot with Mickey running from the barn with the Nick Scarecrow chasing behind her when they go to Geordi and Dave's farmhouse to check it out. That shot with the sun behind it and kind of the lens flare against the camera reminded me very much of the Dance of Death from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There was something about it. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, I wonder if that was a nod. Like, just that angle and shot.
You give this show more credit than I do. I can tell that already.
Maybe. I'm looking for meaning in something that may have none.
Hey, no, that's what this show is all about. Finding patterns where there are none.
This episode did a pretty decent job of setting things up, even though they were 80s obvious. When they reference Marge's picture on the wall. Hey, is that you? Even though it's an obvious picture of her.
Hey, the fact that the show bothered with a setup and payoff at all, I'm going to go ahead and give it an ironic applause at least.
Well, especially with the fact that if Geordi saw the raincoat and the hat at the beginning, and then that's the description he uses when he's talking to Mickey and Ryan, and Marge turns around and uses that to frame the sheriff. There's some smarts to this one. Maybe that's why this one's a favored episode.
Top rated.
Top rated at what? At like 50%?
Yeah, it's a real sliding scale.
It cuts over to Ryan and Mickey driving into town, talking about like sending out some kind of mailer for the Scarecrow and arguing about the fact that she even brought the mail.
Yeah, I still don't understand this. This is one aspect of the show that has never made sense. You have a registry of all your sales, names and addresses and contact information. It seems like the whole premise for this show should be resolved in like an afternoon.
Right. And even calling out the people, hey, you did buy our Scarecrow. Like, wouldn't you have known? One thing I needed to ask you, they comment on Jack that he's out looking for the Icarus feather and they sent a postcard. Has there been any setup for that? Is he just not here this episode? Where are they at with this?
Absolutely none. He was out the last episode as well. Tales of the Undead. That was the previous episode. And no, Jack simply is absent in that one, and I'm pretty sure there's not even a mention of what he might be up to.
Okay. So they mention him here, mention where he's going. I wasn't sure if he told them last episode that he was taking a break or if it was, hey, I've got another job that may pay a little better than Friday the 13th, the series, that you're just going to have to do this one without me.
Yeah, the way they handle him, I think even in the credits, it says something to the effect of with Jack Marshak. Like even the credits seem to establish, I think, that he's second fiddle to John D. LeMay and Luis Roby.
Is he a big Canadian actor, or I guess bigger?
I mean, I don't know exactly where they were at in their careers. He's older, so I'm guessing he was more established, and Luis Roby was coming off of being a pop star, so he'd certainly have more experience than her. I'm not really sure about John D. LeMay exactly, but I don't think any of them was incredibly famous. I mean, I'm guessing actually, but I would think Luis Roby would be, as she was transitioning from being a big enough pop star that someone was willing to give her a shot with a TV show.
Okay. I wasn't sure if he was a big enough name that, yeah, he was an additional character that would come and go because he had bigger things to do.
Yeah, he's an additional character who should be the main character. In fact, I had candidate is he's probably off like Kolchak the Night Stalker, solving entire mysteries on his own off screen while they bumble through even the simplest tasks. My man Crackerjack Marshak would have this thing solved in 5 seconds if he was here. What we get in these last 2 episodes is, and it's mind-blowing that this is even possible, but new and sundry ways for Ryan to demonstrate that he's even a bigger spaz than we previously thought every time he has to fight someone. Last one he was bested by like an 80-year-old man, and this one he's bested by a petite woman.
And a 9-year-old boy.
This is true.
And that 9-year-old boy jumps on his back, tackles him to the ground, punches him, and then runs off.
Yeah, a particularly feisty pigeon would upstage our man Ryan.
They arrive at Charlie and Tootie's farm, and Charlie seems upset that somebody responded to their mailer, but it wasn't him. Tootie obviously seems likely the one who secretly responded. Charlie says, we did buy a scarecrow, but that scarecrow burned up in a fire.
I take it to mean like all their crops went up and the scarecrow went up with it.
Yeah, even though they've been having great crops. And Ryan makes a comment about the fact that the antiques can't be destroyed.
And yeah, that comment about them not being able to destroy things, to the best of my memory, is completely a new piece of lore that just got added to this episode because we've never seen them attempt to destroy any of the items.
And none of them are ever destroyed by the end of the episode because of the action that's going on or anything like that?
No, not even incidentally. No.
And then we get Mickey trying to be clever and search for clues. She gives Ryan a kiss, looks for the John, and wants to go snooping around the house like the Scarecrow's going to be in the damn house.
Yeah, it's best not to think about it too hard.
Well, I have to ask, what she expected to find, pictures of themselves out on vacation with the Scarecrow or something like that. I'm not bill of sale for the Scarecrow.
Yeah, I didn't know what she was hoping to find, nor how she planned on getting away with it. She just thought that's how farms work. Once you are thrown out by the pater familias, no one in that household is ever going to look out the door and be like, oh, their car is still here. So clearly they're just wandering around our property as they see fit.
Well, I'm saying before they even get booted out of the house.
Yes, you're talking about before they get thrown out, and I'm talking about after. Both of their snooping plans seem completely illogical.
Because they leave Ryan to sit there and chat with Charlie and Tootie, and that's when, Mickey screams when she runs into Nick, who's Charlie's son, stuffed away in a locked room, like Ruprecht from Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yeah, the fact that Mickey's grand plan is, let's rely on Ryan's charm to keep them occupied.
Obviously, that was misplaced.
Brilliant, Mickey. What do you think is going on with good old Nick Cobean there? Do we have a people under the stairs situation? Is that a closet? Is that stairs down to a basement? What is happening there?
I assume it's just his bedroom.
See, I wasn't thinking room at all. I was thinking closet underneath the staircase. So he's got just enough room to stand if he's by the door, and then he has to lie down on a mattress that they have along with a blanket and maybe an old black and white TV set.
Oh, he even gets a TV?
Well, they give him a full wardrobe. He's wearing nice clothes.
Yeah. Well, And Charlie implies that something happened to him.
The old kicked by a horse.
That's not a bad headcanon for why Nick is acting the way he does, perhaps.
Except he doesn't have a horseshoe-shaped scar.
Right.
They keep him locked in a room, but he's dressed nice, and they will also allow him not only out and about on the property, but will hand him an axe and have him split wood.
With others around.
So is he a danger to himself and others or not? I
Right.
do not have any idea.
Maybe that's the only thing he knows how to do without killing anybody.
Oh, that keeps his powder dry? That's his outlet, his release?
Yep.
I guess even convicts are allowed a certain amount of time in the yard, so it fits, but it's weird.
Charlie kicks him out, and that's when Ryan and Mickey decide to go spying outside, and they start to get into his barn, which plays a part later. And that's when they run into Marge for the first time, where she is yelling at Ryan and Mickey going, "Who the hell are you?" And Ryan's retort is, "We could ask the same of you."
Yes, I absolutely have that in my script. Ryan the Lion's attempts to bluff are as pathetic as his attempts to fight.
So obviously that doesn't pan out too well, but Marge switches to being friendly.
Well, as friendly as that character gets, I mean, that character is on evil at 11 the entire time.
She mentions that she owns the Longacre Inn, the only place to stay, and of course Ryan makes the crack that nothing like a monopoly to the only person that has a place for him to stay for the night. Seems kind of dickish.
You know what it is? Maybe it's one of the many cases of me suddenly liking a character that was vanilla before, but they act dickish, and I'm like, oh, okay, now you've got some personality. But that was, honestly, much like that previous shot of her staring at the Scarecrow cross was my favorite shot of the entire series so far. That delivery by John D. LeMay is actually my favorite line he has ever delivered.
Wow, that's definitely saying a whole lot, because I thought it was a weird snap. Like, why would you come after the only person who's got a damn inn in the town?
Yeah, why call it out in front of her? I don't know, but it was just Bill Murray enough to slip past, I thought. Just dry enough where I could see someone not rolling their eyes and asking, what the hell, man?
Maybe these podunk people just don't understand sarcasm.
It's John D. LeMay's near David Duchovny level emoting that allows that line to work, in my opinion.
I can see that.
It is the kindling of dry retorts.
It cuts to all of them at the inn, and they call out the picture on the wall that is obviously her and her husband, that being a farmer buried him. That might be her motive for killing all these farmers. Like, I don't know what to say, why she even made that comment.
It seems likely 2D contacted Ryan and Mickey off screen from their flyer. Unfortunately, the Cobain's marriage, like so many others, has a giant rift at the center of it based around a haunted scarecrow.
She's likely the one that had responded to the mailer.
Well, let's be honest. Charlie Cobain did not see the flyer. That man does not read flyers. We've got a Midwestern farmer's wife who I'm sure checks out the Penny Saver every Sunday, goes through all the coupons. She's the one that came across the flyer.
I think that makes the most sense without all of the information.
Well, hey, that's the nature of this show. You're never working with complete information.
Right.
A lot of headcanon when watching this.
Tootie sneaks out in the middle of the night, I'm assuming hoping to catch up with Mickey and tell her what's really going on or where the Scarecrow is. But Marge has overheard, so she's decided that she's going to take her out. You see Marge set up the Scarecrow with the picture to go and chase her down in the middle of the night. So you see a couple seconds of Tootie running in the dark, running away from the Scarecrow, and gets to the front door of the Longacre Inn. Something warns Mickey that somebody's at the front door, that something's going on. She rushes to the front door within seconds after the Scarecrow finally catches up with Tootie.
You're absolutely right. It's like they forgot to add the Foley, or they ran out of money and just couldn't hire a Foley artist or be bothered to plunk in a stock sound effect, because she reacts as if she heard something, but we, the audience, basically hear nothing.
She comes running to the door, sees a wiggling head on the front porch.
Yeah, I don't know how else you would describe that. It's rocking side to side, maybe.
The details of the fake head remind me of the demons in the final ghost of Scrooged. But instead of wiggling in between the rib cage of the Ghost of Christmas Future, it's sitting on the doormat of the Longacre Inn.
I feel sorry for the PA that had to run out there between each take and give it a little rock. Some shows have a monster of the week. This series has a curio of the week. And so do we. Believe me, no one paid us for the following endorsements. And once they hear the show, it's more likely they'll pay us to retract them. We just want to share some cool things with you while simultaneously using our platform to give a little free promotion to those without a massive advertising budget. So, Peter, what is your curio of the week?
My curio of the week is a board game called Final Girl by Van Ryder Games. The premise of the game is really that you're the final girl in one of the stereotypical thriller horror movies. You've got like your puppet master that you're trying to fight, or a version of Jason called Hans the Butcher, or a version of Freddy Krueger with Dr. Fright on Maple Lane instead of Nightmare on Elm Street. You're the final girl trying to save the innocent victims in the storyline to get power-ups, and you're trying to defeat the monster in the end. It's probably one of the most fun solo games that you will lose all the time. It's extremely difficult to actually beat the boss, and the longer it takes for you to beat them, the harder it's going to be. Trying to fight the horror villain while at the same time rescuing innocents or dealing with the event that is going on at that location.
Is fighting the slasher the entire game, or are you fighting like smaller minions first, or do you have to find the slasher and then fight him?
So each of them kind of varies. The quote-unquote easy mission is the Hans the Butcher, which is just him running around and slaughtering innocents. Whereas the Geppetto Puppet Master Carnival Slasher has little Puppet Master minions. And they're still coming out with these. They have currently 3 seasons of characters, each of them with 5 or 6 different enemies in them. I think the latest one, season 3, is the Hellraiser character. They have like xenomorphs called evomorphs, and they have a version of like the Thing called the Organism.
Oh, very
and
cool.
each of the locations are kind of swappable. So you can use the slasher from one genre, use the map from a different genre, and use the final girl that kind of matches a different genre. And each of them will have special events that only happen in that location, or special issues with the slasher that only happen with that slasher, and special power-ups that you only get with that final girl. So you can kind of mix and match it to the point where nothing is ever really the same. And I also like the way that Van Ryder set these up, that they go way into feeling thematic. They have gruesome death paragraphs and write-ups for, like, if you died this specific way, then you can read this paragraph that kind of fits the theme of what just happened. It's really engrossing as a slasher single-player game. And they all come in a set that makes them look like they're VHS tapes. The boxes are set up to look like a VHS player.
This creator really knows his demographic, huh?
Oh, definitely. And they're way into horror themselves.
So they've got a Saw and The Lighthouse.
We'll see how far they go.
Oh, I can't wait to see their reference to summer camp. This is a mat-based game with minis and cards and dice.
Each box itself, when you pull the box apart, is the map, or is the character play card, or is the monster. And then, yeah, it comes with resin figurines, and it's got cards, and then it's got dice.
And if you haven't backed the campaign, where does one pick it up?
In, like, board game stores, definitely I've seen them there. And I think I've seen them at a Target or Walmart in their board game area.
What's the website where someone could find that?
VanRyderGames.com. So it's VANRYDER games.com. It's exciting every time I play it. I enjoy it a lot.
Sounds great, man. I'd love to give it a try.
Yeah, you should.
I'm afraid my curio of the week isn't as apropos as Peter's. It's the avant-garde Comedy Central series Strangers with Candy, starring Amy Sedaris, Paul Dinello, and Stephen Colbert. Yes, that Stephen Colbert. While always described as a spoof or parody or satire of shows once known as after-school specials, I've always felt that description is a bit reductionist for the sake of brevity, and maybe even a little misleading. It's a parody of after-school specials the way Chris Elliott's show Get a Life was an anti-sitcom. Yes, they're both built directly on the foundations of their respective genres, but what's constructed on top shows far more imagination than what the floor plan would suggest. It's like saying the walls of Gaudi's houses are made of broken ceramic tiles. Yes, absolutely true, but that description completely fails to capture the spirit of those stunning mosaics. You'll have to forgive me for being obtuse. I swear I'm not dancing around a better description just because you can't really explain comedy. Honestly, I wouldn't say the show is laugh out loud funny, but it's far too interesting to miss. Before we go, I want to take a moment to do something I should have done a long time ago and thank Laura83B for the 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and a meaty review, which I will truncate slightly here. I had heard of the TV show before and even seen a few episodes. I remember the premise being better than the finished product, and this podcast gives us a much-needed deep dive into all the reasons why. Whether you've seen the TV show or not, whether you enjoyed the TV show or not, you'll enjoy this podcast. Well, grazie mille, Laura83B. You said it better than I ever could. Folks, I'm always happy to read a positive review on air, so long as you don't, praise us and Hitler. Peter and I will be back next week, and with introductions out of the way, we'll launch right in with more smoking hot Leather Daddy Scarecrow action.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We know you have a lot of choices when choosing a Friday the 13th the Series podcast, and we sincerely thank you for choosing ours. Special thanks to Joshua Romeo for original music, and to Stephen Yu for original art. And be sure to check out the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe Slepsky discusses G.I. Joe. If you want to support our show, you can leave a review and rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you want an occasional update on our projects, you can sign up for our newsletter at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And if you want to know exactly how behind schedule our latest episode will be, you can find social media links on our website. Take care until then, and always remember what Carl said to Frylock. It don't matter. None of this matters. Good night, everybody.